You're listening to the Stories and Strategies Podcast, the most listened to public relations podcast in the world. Here's your host, Doug Downs.
Okay. Andrea, it's good. It's good. I think we need to pump Stories and Strategies. That's the name of the company, right? So can we pull that one out a little bit? Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
You're listening to the Stories and Strategies Podcast, the most listened to public relations podcast in the world.
Andrea, it's good. A good pump there.
Okay.
It needs to have a little more emotional appeal around that most listened to, because we're saying it's the most, right? So
I hear you.
Emotion.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're listening to the Stories and Strategies Podcast, the most listened to public.
Andrea, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Okay.
Can we maybe double time, like pick up a bit more? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. All right.
Okay. You're listening to the Stories and Strategies Podcast, the most listened to public relations podcast in the world.
Good.
Here's your host.
Good. Okay, let's pick it up a little bit more.
We're gonna really
more,
you want me
more
to go
emotional
faster?
appeal and have some fun with it, babe.
Okay, babe. Okay.
My name is Doug Downs. Just a quick note off the top. I want to thank Chloe Carlo, who left us a review on CastBox. We're growing like weeds on CastBox. It's been great to see. Chloe says, looking forward to diving into stories and strategies as a student seeking to grasp the intricacies of effective communication in the digital age. I believe this resource will be invaluable. Chloe, thank you so much. All reviews, we love to read them on the show. And from the bottom of my heart, they're so appreciated because that's organic growth, right? That's when you do that, people are more inclined to want to listen. My guest this week is Andrea Rooz, joining today from Toronto. Hey, Andrea.
Hello, Doug. How are you?
I'm good. So I'll ask how things are in Toronto. I know the baseball team is losing a lot of games, and we're into May, so hockey is, that's playoffs, so the Leafs aren't there.
That was so heartbreaking because they were rallying at the end, and we all thought, it was just. But you know what? As I told my kids, you're going to get used to this feeling.
Yes.
It's really sad, but
especially with Boston. That is your Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
Video you're the voice of 1,000 different things. Subways.
Yep.
Cars.
Yeah.
Video games. Yeah. TV shows like Breaking Bad.
Well, the described video for Breaking Bad for the visually impaired.
Now, there's a whole nother reason for me to go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
And put the described video on so I can hear your voice.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. That's one of my favorite jobs to do, by the way.
And you're on lots of radio stations. If you've ever taken a subway in Toronto, the TTC, the Toronto Transit Commission, that's Andrea's voice. Next stop, DuPont.
Actually, it's more like the if you see something, say something. Line 1 is closed between Finch and Shepherd stations. It's that kind of thing.
Well, and there's people listening, lots of listeners in Toronto. They're wait, now, okay, I know who this is.
Do you know how excited people get when they hear that I'm the voice? That is my big claim to fame. Everyone gets very excited when I tell them that, and then I have to do the voice for them, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, it is you!" It's crazy.
Awesome. If you ever hear the telephony for U.S. Bank and T-Mobile, that's Andrea's voice in the U.S. You've been doing this kind of work since 2001, and before that, it was radio, of course. You and I share that love.
Yep.
You got to work on the Howard Stern Show and later with John Derringer, so it's awesome to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Let's start with the basic. To get into this kind of work, voiceover work, do you just need to have some kind of God-given voice? Either it's the dulcet tones, or for I suppose men, that big, bassy Morgan Freeman voice, or the Yeardley Smith, absolutely unique Lisa Simpson voice. Is it about God-given stuff, or can anybody do this?
It used to be back in the 80s, they were looking for the radio voice, the male Don LaFontaine trailer voice. The voice of God is what they call it, actually. And that is no longer the case. Now, the trend is they want real people selling them stuff. I get for a lot of the commercials I do, the direction is just sound like, you're telling your best friend. So it's got to be that, they want the everyman, regular human voice now. So it's changed. It has definitely changed.
So what makes, not to gender this, but what makes a good male voice and what makes a good female voice and any other voices that fit within there?
Well, your voice is great, for instance, because...
Oh, go on. Seriously, go on.
No.
Keep going. Yeah.
You sound like every man. You sound like the guy next door. You just sound like a regular guy, like a dude that you'd want to hang out with. And that is very similar to for the females. Of course, it depends on what you're selling. If it's chocolate, you're going to have a little bit more gravitas and that luscious sound, right? But if it's, I don't know, Tampax, you're selling to other women and they want to hear, right. So it really does depend on what you're selling. But yeah, and the trend, thank God, has gone away. For a while, we were hearing a lot of vocal fry. Thank you, Kardashians. And thank God that's gone. So, now it's just be yourself. Talk to your friend.
So why does the voiceover count? And I think I can almost answer my own question, because when you described that you would need a particular tone to sell chocolate, does the voiceover count because ultimately it's part of the experience of the advertisement or the experience of the show, if that's what you're doing,
or the brand, or you are basically like the sound of the brand. So those things have to all align, right?
And how do you appeal to the every person? And I get that because study after study says the person I trust the most is someone just like me.
Yeah.
I trust scientists. I do.
Yeah.
And we can get into a whole debate there, because not always. Depends on whether the scientist agrees with me. But I do trust someone just like me. So that every person read, how do you do that?
That it has to be the hardest thing to do, because often, especially if you're given a commercial, it's not how people talk. You're not talking about APR financing at 3.25% and, yada, 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 the way and so what we've been taught actually is because obviously we're recording and editing. So before you go into something, I say to my best friend, I'm like, hey, Gabby, did you hear that this car is like, you can get this for 4.25% at, this discounted rate. And so you sort of lead in, especially if you're doing commercials, with that. And you try to take things off the page. So you almost have to memorize your copy, right? You almost memorizing your copy. You're not reading exactly verbatim what is on the page. You're trying to interpret that in a way that people speak.
The affected read, and that is, men were famous for it, 60s, 70s, 80s. You're listening to the Stories and Strategies podcast. What you're describing is we're fading out of that.
Yes.
Has it, though, gone completely away? Because if it's an every person read, then any person could theoretically do it. And yet we have professionals who are paid large sums of money in some case to be the one to read the voice. So where is that?
Like Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on what you're doing, right? It depends on the brand and certain things like CNN. You're going to need that voice as opposed to like CNN. But there are some TV and radio stations that actually want that. You're going to hear more of that casual read for I don't know what they call it anymore, the women oxygen. Right? So again, if it's National Geographic is going to have a very different sound than CNN or Fox News. Right? They're so it's amazing how audio really affects how you feel, right, about something. And it automatically kicks something into you that, oh, this is that. This is serious. This is lighthearted. This is, whatever. It's interesting how there's room for all those reads, basically.
And it comes down to your ability to interpret what the brand wants, and sometimes, which is a different thing, what the brand actually needs, as well as the audience here. So age demographic, you can pick a lot of different ways to split demographics, but let's pick an age demographic. Does an older demographic, does it find the authoritative voice more appealing, and the younger demographic, you're nodding your head as I speak. So obviously, okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you've got the Gen Z, Gen Z, who obviously don't want to be told. They want to just hear it as like casual information. Whereas I think people of an older generation who grew up with Walter Cronkite telling them and making them feel informed and safe, right? That's a very different. So yeah, demographics is a lot.
One of the things the every person speaks with is the tendency to end a lot of sentences on a verbal uplift. Like we know a lot of people who talk like that. Are there actually voiceover reads where that's part of the requirement?
Nah, I mean, certain sentences maybe, but my gosh, if we're hearing that throughout a commercial, it stops us in our tracks. It's unsettling. You don't want to hear that all the time. Like that's part of that whole vocal fry group that, oh my God.
Right. Okay. So how do you get into this? Do you have to go through radio first? Do you just create a demo and start pumping it out there, meet and greet, shake some hands, do a few gigs? Is that the essence of it?
So what people don't really understand about this is it's voice acting. So the best way to get into this is really take acting classes. And you're an improv and all of those things, because you are constantly pulling on those skills, as opposed to, especially because they want the every person now, you want to be relatable, but you're embodying a character with your voice, which is interesting because you don't have the ability to show emotion with your facial expressions or your hands or your movements. It all has to be with your voice. They have to hear that character through one thing only.
Right.
Their ears, right?
The technical setup. You've invested a lot into that. You have a good microphone. You have a home studio, because the paid studio, I don't know how you feel about this, but my own look at the paid studio is that it's going the way of the pay phone. That kind of, even for music, you sort of don't really need those big expensive studios anymore.
Which is really sad.
Yeah.
It's sad because I love that, because that's part of, that was a
charm.
A collaborative process too, because you would have a producer, you would have a director, you would have your audio engineer all together, and you guys are creating something special, as opposed to now I'm sitting in my very sweaty booth by myself with my picture of Jerry Garcia beside me. Like it's dark. Yeah. And it's kind of sad. Do you want me to show you around the studio a little bit?
What is the technical set? Like, what mic do you use? And then I do want to see the studio.
Well, first of all, it's a tiny little, so I'm reading off of my iPad. There's my Sennheiser 416, which is a boom mic, which means that I can be far away from it, or if I need to go a little bit closer and be a little more intimate, I can do that. But apparently for my voice, I don't know, that one works. But like, it's literally, oh, Jesus. Yeah. There's like my light and my Jerry Garcia picture.
Right.
It's fully padded. I don't know if you can see that in here.
You're in a padded cell. Yes, you are.
In a padded cell. Yeah. And
is that egg carton?
Yeah. Yeah. It's old school. I don't have any kind of ventilation in here. So it is hot and it gets really uncomfortable after a while.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a fully like drywalled like it's part of my house now. If I sell my house, I'm going to have to tear it down according to my real estate agent. Nobody wants this. So yeah. Yeah. But it was very important. Obviously, I just moved in October and I had to have a place that had a space for this, right? So yeah.
And microphone technique. I mean, I work with a lot of clients and there's a tendency, they don't want the mic right in their face, so they move it away from them. And I try to move it closer. They go, okay, is that better? Does that sound a little? Well, it's a little better. But where do you want the mic to be ultimately to sound?
So again,
best?
It depends on the kind of microphone you're using. With a boom mic, which is literally used in movies and television shows, they put it way up high over the actors' heads and they're hearing it. This, I can move back. But if you're using a regular mic, this is actually one of the things that a technique.
You're doing the thumb and the pinky finger thing.
Basically to show
6 inches. Yeah.
I have really small hands, but yeah, so it's about that.
Okay, so you want to be fairly close to the mic.
Yeah, if you're using if it's a a USB mic, probably yes. Having a mic sock over your microphone is probably also good for plosives and your S's, which I always
do I talk right into the mic?
No. Like where you are, obviously, you've got good mic technique.
I learned from you,
right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
So off to the side, and my rule is about
a little bit off to the side. Yeah,
fist from,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That works, but definitely off to the side. For most microphones, you don't want to be right on, because that will give you lots of plosives, which nobody
the
wants.
best way to prepare my voice is to go outside and have a smoke before I get ready, right? Just puff on a cigarette.
Yeah.
That's the
cigarette.
Have a cigar.
Sure.
That's a big read.
Yeah. Listen, one of the things that I usually have in my studio is a green apple, which is a very common technique amongst voice actors because that takes away the mouth noise. Nobody wants to hear that. It's an awful noise.
Right.
But it doesn't last very long. So you literally have to be like, hang on, I'm taking a bite of my apple, suck on it for a little bit, and then, swallow and then keep going. Right. Or there's also these, they're like breath mints. They're called TheraBreath.
TheraBreath.
But TheraBreath, I have it somewhere around me. Oh, here. Yes. TheraBreath, dry mouth.
Right.
See, most people, right? You want to sort of, when your mouth is dry, that's pretty much when you're making most of the noise, right? And there's also gum. Like I use especially the Trident, where is it? My Trident Vibe gum that somehow is very juicy. Mm-hmm. It lasts a long time. And then I do that whole, what was that show movie? Oh, he would take the piece of gum. He was a singer. It was a comedy. He would take the piece of gum, put it behind his ear. He's like, 1 minute. What was that movie? Now it's going to drive me crazy. Anyway, so it's a very famous scene in a movie. So I will literally chew on a piece of gum, hold it in my finger, and then pop it back in my mouth and do that a bunch of times to make sure that I don't have mouth noise.
So when I'm watching the Breaking Bad, not the closed captioning reading,
described
but the described video. Can I picture you with a piece of gum like on your big finger and you're describing?
Yeah.
That's outstanding.
Yes.
What about water? Is water and water versus coffee? Should I have coffee beside me or
water for sure. And you really need to hydrate for like the day before you're working, right? Like you should constantly be hydrating. You can't just have a glass of water and expect that your voice is going to sound great because you're drinking water at that moment. You have to be constantly hydrated.
That is so.
Yeah.
You have a cool job. When people say, "What do you do?"
Really
and
cool
you say,
job.
"Well, I do voiceover."
I'm a voice actor.
Do you see their eyes light up?
And they're like,
do they sort of, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They're like, oh, that's very interesting. And then, of course, they ask me, like, what? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? So it means a million different things, which is why this is so fun. You know, I did my first video game last year, which, again, I got to play all these, like, interesting characters. And yes, there's a lot of corporate and commercial work. It's a lot of auditioning, and boy, oh boy, do you have to have a tough skin, because everybody seems to want to do this now. And over the pandemic, a lot of actors ended up creating their own studios. Right. So now the competition is intense, and you hear no a lot.
Right.
They're very like, so you better be tough.
The little skit you and I did off the top there.
Yeah.
Where you were voicing very well, and I was being the producer jerk.
Yeah.
That's very real, whether it's the producer or the client. What are some of the requests that you get?
So I literally had a tagline for a commercial.
Yeah.
I obviously won't say the product.
Right.
But it was probably 3 words. And we were there for 4 hours. Oh. They obviously didn't know what they wanted, so I'm just like saying the same thing how diverse can you get with these 3 words? I think they went back to like the first or the second take.
Oh,
right?
no.
Yeah. And then there's also, let's read 90 seconds worth of copy in 25 seconds. Yeah.
Yes.
So things like that are very frustrating. But when you work with professionals like yourself, it's easy, and it's the best gig in the world.
You're saying, Andrea's saying this because she and I have worked in that. I have a client who insists on using Andrea's voice, and I've counseled them many times. Let's mix this up. Let's move beyond this Rooz character.
Let's not. We really like this.
Yeah, and it's gone exceptionally well. So,
thank you.
But speed up. Different emphasis.
Yeah. And again, the thing that we hear most nowadays is tell it to me like you're talking to a friend.
Right.
Which is a really tough one.
Right. Andrea, I have really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for your time. This was fascinating. And I'm associated with it.
Thank you. So. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Now the name of the movie is going to drive me crazy. They're like a rock band, and the guy from Laverne and Shirley.
You mean This One Goes to 11? Is that the movie?
Yes,
This goes to 11.
Spinal Tap.
Ding,
Thank
ding,
you. I got it.
If you'd like to send a message to my guest, Andrea Rooz, we've got her contact information in the show notes. Stories and Strategies is a co-production of JGR Communications and Stories and Strategies podcasts. If you like this episode, please leave a rating, possibly a review. Those mean the world to us when we read those reviews on future episodes. Big thanks to Emily Page, our producer for this podcast. We're also on YouTube and YouTube Music, full audio episodes, and we publish short video segments as well. Lastly, do us a favor, forward this episode to one friend. Thanks for listening.